In this video, I want to break down question 6 of the Leaving Cert composition paper. So questions 1, 2, and 3 are the melody writing questions. You have to choose one of those and they're worth 40 marks. That question is worth 40 marks. The composition paper is, the harmony question is worth even more marks. It's worth 60 to the melody is 40. And that's questions 4, 5, and 6 are the harmony questions. You've got to do one of them. In previous videos, I've gone through questions 4 and 5. So in this video, I want to go through question 6. Okay, so question 6. What you have to do is write a descant or a counter melody to go along with an original melody and also a set of chords. So it's quite similar to question 5 in that sense. In question 5 you were given a melody, you had to write chords and a bass line. In question 6 you're given a melody, you have to write a descant and chords. So how is writing a descant different to writing a bass line? Well, first of all, you'll notice that both lines of music use the treble clef here, so none of them are using the bass clef. That's because the melody that you're actually writing, it goes above the original melody. So this one here, the one on the bottom, that's the original melody. That's the one you're given the entire way through, as you can see. And then this top one, you're given the first 4 bars, as you can see here, but then you have to write the next 12 bars. And that's the descant, or the counter melody. A descant means a counter melody that's above the original melody. So it's at a higher pitch than the original melody. So that's what you have to do. You have to write this top line, an extra little melody above the original, and also a set of chords. So like I said, very similar to question 5. But it is different in some important ways, apart from the fact that you're writing in a treble clef and you're writing above the melody rather than below it. Some of the main things you have to keep in mind when you're doing this that are different to question 5 are that the two lines of music, so your top line and your bottom line, they shouldn't really cross too often. Your top line should nearly always be above your bottom line. So this line here, hang on, I'm just going to scroll up so you can see this. So this line here should nearly always be above this line. You shouldn't go down below it. You can, over the course of your 16 bars, you can cross the melodies once or twice if you want to. But if you're doing it the whole time and if the two melodies are at roughly the same pitch, then they're going to get in the way of each other. It's going to sound very muddy and it's going to look to an examiner like you don't know what you're doing, like you didn't even know that the counter melody you're writing should be written above the original. So it's important that you don't cross the line too often. You can do it once or twice, but generally you should try to keep your top line quite a bit above the given melody. Okay, so that's the main thing. That's the main way it's different to question 5. Other than that, the process is essentially the same. It's the same harmonic concepts. You're adding in notes that should go with the notes you're already given and make up a certain chord. The chord progressions that are allowed, I suppose, in question 6 are the same as the ones that are allowed in question 5. So in that sense, if you've been studying question 5, question 6 is going to be very similar. And if you look back at the videos we've done on question 5, it will teach you quite a lot about this to begin with. But anyway, let's go through it. I'm going to just so you can see, this is what you're given. The boxes I've drawn in here, these boxes are the chord boxes that you're given, and then you have to fill in those chord boxes and add a descant or a counter melody. So what I'm going to do in this video is quickly analyze one that I've already done. I'll do a worked example in a future video, but this is what I've written for what I've shown you above, for what you've been given. So let's quickly go through it. So there's one thing I would say before you do anything else is try to write in the chords before you start writing in your counter melody, before you start writing in your descant. So you're given, I'm just going to draw arrows. The red arrow shows you what you're given for each line. So you're given the bottom line each time. So the bit over the top of that is what I've written. So when I'm going through it, I'm going to want to write in my chords first. I'm going to be looking at the bottom line that they've given me and trying to work out what chords should be written above that bottom line. And the things I'll take into account when I'm trying to decide what chords should be there are, first of all, what notes they've used. So you can see in this bar, they've used the notes D and F sharp. So that, because we're in the key of D, as you can see from our 2 sharps at the start here, that instantly tells me it's chord 1. It's going to be chord D, because the notes D and F sharp are the root note and the third of the chord of D. And generally, you can kind of work out what chord it is in descending order of importance. So if you can use chord 1, use chord 1. If you can't use chord 1, see if you can use chord 5. If you can't use chord 1 or 5, see if you can use chord 4. If you can't use any of those, see if you can use chord 2, and if you can't use chord 2, see if you can use chord 6. That's kind of the hierarchy of chords that you can use. Always see if you can use the one closest to the top first. It'll just make things a lot easier on you. So I know we're going to use chord 1 here because it spells out chord 1, and chord 1 is like our most important chord. Now, I get into our next bar. As you can see, I've used A here. So why did I use A? Well, again, I can use this hierarchy of chords that I've shown you over here. The notes they've given me are E, A, and then G. But this G is just a passing note leading from the G to the F sharp here. The main notes they've given me are A and E, which are two of the notes of the chord A, which is chord 5. So therefore, on a hierarchy of chords, I know that that's going to be chord 5. It can't be chord 1 because E is on a strong beat. E isn't one of the notes of D. And even if that hadn't been an E, if it had been a D or an F sharp, one of the notes of the chord of D, I still couldn't have used it because you can't use the same chord in two successive boxes. So it has to be chord 5. So these are the things to take into account when you're working out your chord progression. And that's the thing you should do first. You should look at the chord boxes they've given you, and you should try and work out your chord progression. Go through this hierarchy of chords that I've given you here. I'm going to do a whole video on this hierarchy of chords in future. But try to get the ones closer to the top when you're trying to decide which chord to use in a progression. And then the main rules, other than that, for choosing your chords are don't use the same chord in two successive boxes. So don't use D here and then D again here, even if you can, because you can't use the same, even if the notes let you do it, you still can't do it because it's the same chord in two successive boxes. It's not allowed. The other things to take into account when you're choosing which chords to use are look at your cadence points. So your cadence points are the end of each phrase. This is our phrase marks to show us the end of each phrase. So it's essentially the end of each line. And our cadence points are always the bit leading into that. So the last two chords, how does it cadence? Last two, or maybe last three chords you could say as well, but I'm just going to look at the last two here. Okay, so when you get to cadence points, you really need to think about what's important. Your last cadence should always be a perfect cadence, chord 5 to chord 1, which as you can see in this case it is. You can also have chords 5, 7 to 1, so you can have A7 going to D here. I've used a perfect cadence here. At the end of phrases, you can also use an imperfect cadence, like when you end on chord 5, which they've done here. They've gone from chord 1 to chord 5. You can also use what I've got an interrupted cadence here, A going to B minor. So cadence points are a really important one to look at. And I'll do a whole video on cadences in the future. This is actually one of the melody writing videos already if you want to have a look at that. So you want to look at your cadences, you want to think about not having the same chord in two successive boxes, you want to go by our hierarchy of chords here. You also want to just have a look at potential places to use seventh chords or inversions, slash chords. I haven't used any seventh chord in this, but a seventh chord would essentially the only ones you're really going to use in this question are chord 5, 7. So you might use an A7 in a perfect cadence before it goes to D, which I mentioned already. We could do an A7 here if we wanted, and we would just have to have a G note, which would be the seventh of the chord of A in there. We could do an A7 here, which would be chord 5, 7 going to chord 1, again for perfect cadence. So you can have seventh chords like that. And inversions are these ones here, these slash chords, so D slash A. And as we've discussed in previous videos, what you essentially do when you've got D slash A is you have the note after the slash, so the A note in this case, that would be in the lower part. So in the melody that they've given us, which is the lower part, because we can't have our two melodies cross too often, in our lower part they've got an A note. But then, as you can see here, they've got, in this last part, they've got A, and A, and then it ends on D. Now I know that I can't have the chord A twice in this bar in a row, because I can't have the same chord in two bars in succession. I could have done something like A7 here, But what I did instead is that I wrote D slash A, so still got my A in the bass, but I've got a D note over the top, and then I've given an A here. So just those slash chords and those sevens are things to look out for. We've discussed them a lot in previous videos, and I'll do more on them. But for the moment, they're just something you could use. It's good to have maybe one seventh chord and one slash chord, one inversion in your entire harmony thing, just to show that you know how to use them. Okay, so those are the main things to look at in terms of choosing which chords you're going to use. And like I said, I'd recommend choosing all your chords first, and then you can start writing your melody. Because once you've got your chords chosen, writing the melody is actually quite simple. It's really just a case of filling in the gaps almost, and um, using a lot of passing notes going from one chord to the next. So as you can see, I've chosen the chord D here. So on my strong beats, I want to outline notes of the chord D. I'm just going to use the color, I'll use the color yellow for this. So on my strong beats, because we're in 3/4 time, we've got a D note, an A, and an A, all notes of the chord D. And everything in between those is just notes passing between them, passing notes that lead, or auxiliary notes that lead from one to the other. When we've got the chord A here on my strong beat, I've got A, E, and C sharp, all notes in the chord of A, and everything in between is just passing notes. That's really all I'm doing here. I'm just looking at what what are the notes of the chord, what can I use? So I've got a long minim held for a D here, works over the D chord. On my A, I've just got an A note. On my chord of D here, on my strong beats, I've got F sharp, A, and I know I've got a C sharp here, but that's because it's kind of leading, it's framing this D that I'm going to have for the B minor in the next bar. So I can have notes that are not in the chord if I have a good reason to do so. But as you can see, generally, more often than not, just on your strong beats, have notes of this chord, notes of the whatever chord you've given, and everything between that is just passing notes. So that's how you choose which notes to use once you've got your chord progression already written in there. Other things to watch for are what rhythms are you going to use, how long are you going to hold each note for. Some things to take into account there are look at the rhythms in what they've given you. As you can see, in the first bar they've given me, they've got crotchets in one part with quavers in the other. So I've reused that quite a few times. I've used this here. You can see I've used it again here. I know I'm writing a lot over what I've written here, but it's just to kind of get some points across. So quite often, you can see it here again, I've got crotchets in one part and quavers in another. So I'm really taking from the rhythms that they've given me in the opening. You can also see at times they've held like a long minim in the top part and a crotchet. They've done it again here, while there's some quaver and crotchet movement in the lower part. And I did that as well a few times. I have a minim and a crotchet with some quaver movement in the lower part. I've got the opposite here. I've got a minim and a crotchet in the lower part. Well, they've written that, and I've got some quaver and crotchet movement here. So you want to take the rhythms that they've got. You don't want to have too much in there yourself that they haven't got in the original. And the other main point when choosing the rhythms is if you want to have movement in one part and not in the other. So if you've got a lot of quaver movement in, say, the top part, you want to have just crotchet movement or even long held minims in the lower part. If you've got a lot of quaver movement in the lower part, you want to have long held minims in the top part, like I've got here, dotted minims in this case. So those are the main things to think about in terms of the rhythm. That's mainly how you approach question 6. So like I said, it's very similar to question 5. Just you're writing a descant instead of a bass line. You want to write in your chords first. Choose your chords using this hierarchy of chords as I've given you. Don't have the same chord in two consecutive boxes. Try to have 1/7 and one inversion in your entire composition, just so that you can show you're actually able to use those. Then write your melody. Choose notes from the chords you've used on your strong beats and use lots of passing notes in between them. In terms of rhythm, try to have movement in one part and then long notes in the other where possible. Try to use the rhythms they've given you above, and those are the main things. Other than that, I hope that's been helpful for you. I'm going to do a work example in a future video and you'll get to see a lot more of this then.